All right, welcome back. In this video, we're going to do a little work with materials. We're going to get some textures and build up a material for our floor and make that work. Enjoy the video. Okay, we're back in here. I want to point out one thing. I missed a little minor step here. Just forgot about it. The reason our sky sphere looked so weird orange color at the time was we needed to come down here and set the directional light as the light source for the BP sky sphere. And now all of the texture came out. We've got our sun up there, and it looks really good. So we've got a nice little environment here to play around with. At some point here, I'm going to want to put walls up on this thing, but I think first we want a texture for this floor. And we want to do something nice. So I think we're going to step away briefly from Unreal Engine and go take a look at some textures and come up with a nice floor texture for here, and we'll create a texture in GIMP and use Crazy Bump to give it a little bit of better look, and we'll create a material for the floor. So let's do that. Oh, first, if you come down here and click Save All, I did this already. When you save this, it's going to ask you where you want to save your map, and the map we just created here is right now called Untitled. So I'm going to go here and right click and go rename. Where is it? There it is. Rename, and I'm going to just call this, I'm going to call this test map. It's the test map because it's where we're going to do testing of stuff. And over here in the content browser on the right hand side, I'm going to right click, go new folder. I'm going to call this maps. Excuse me, maps, and I'm going to take that test map and the test map build data, both of them, and I'm just going to move them into maps. And when you do that, when you drag, I'm going to redo that again. I'm going to select both of them with shift with my shift key. So I click on one and click on the other with the shift key, so they're both selected. I'll drag them across and drop them in maps, and when I drag them across and drop them, I get this little menu that I can move or copy or do an advanced copy. Well, I just want to move them. There's no linkages or anything to worry about. We can just move them into maps. And now when we go into maps, they're here. And this is where we will put any maps we create. Maps are basically the scenes that we're going to be dealing with, and we can switch between them during gameplay and so forth, and we'll talk about that. So let's create a texture for this floor using some textures and using GIMP, and then we'll build a material for it, and we'll drop it on here and see how it looks. And at some point we will replace this floor probably with a model that we will build and unwrap in Blender. But for now, we're just going to use this this box brush that's on here. Why not? Let's download this one and save that in our textures file. And we'll close this. So let's go File, Open, and there's my textures and antique background, close-up construction. So that's that rocky one, and this is the wood one. So this is the one that we want. All right, we've got it open in GIMP, and the first thing I want to do is see what this is going to look like if I make it a tileable image. And we can do some tricks with the materials that'll make it look good up close and far away without getting the tiling effect. So let's go to here. We'll go to Filters and Map and Make Seamless, it's called. And we'll see what happens. This just turned this into a completely seamless texture. What that means is that this edge over here exactly matches this edge, and this edge down here exactly matches this top edge, and if you put them side by side, they will match up precisely, and you won't see a seam between them. However, you will see a little bit of tiling because of this discoloration, and we could correct that. It would be a little bit tedious, but I'm not going to worry about it because I'm going to use a technique in Unreal Engine to make that far less noticeable down the road. We're not going to do those advanced techniques just yet. So what I want to do now is take and export this I could save this, but if it's such a simple operation, I don't really need to save it as a project file. I can always open it up and redo it if I wanted to, or just open up the PNG. So we're just going to go export as, and I want this to be not a JPG. I want to make it a PNG. I guess it doesn't really matter, but I like PNG files. So it also helps me know that it's not my original source file. And I'm going to tag on to the end of this. Actually, I'm going to rename the whole thing, and I'm just going to call it test floor. So it's our test world. It's the floor, and I'm going to call it seamless. And we'll click on export. We'll click on export. Okay, there, it finally did it. Didn't like my first, I guess because my first click was popping out of that there. We'll click export again, let it do its thing. This is a fairly big file. It's pretty high resolution, which is nice. If we want to see in GIMP what its resolution is, we can go up here to image, and probably an easy one would be to do like scale image. We can see that this is 2832 by 2832 right now, so it's a very big image with a lot of detail in it, so that'll be very nice. So, and I don't want to just discard the changes. I already exported it, so we're okay with that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fire this up. And this is a good opportunity to show you what I've got in my library now. I will have this tutorial, what did I call it? Shooter game? Shooter game. This shooter game. So we have this, and we've got that texture. I'm going to create two folders now. I'm going to go over here to Content. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it Textures. So we've got our texture that we just made in GIMP. And I'm going to right-click again and create another folder. I'm going to call it Materials. And I'm going to explain the difference between a texture and a material as we go through this. But in general, a material has both the texture or whatever other effects you want in it that makes the actual material that's going to ultimately go on a surface. So for this texture, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring up my regular Windows Explorer here, and textures is the folder that we want, and we've got this one, and I'm just going to take it and take this seamless one, drag it over here, and drop it right into Unreal Engine. And you'll see that it comes up and it says importing. And it's imported. We can now do a save all. And that imported object is now it's now an object within Unreal Engine. It's something it understands. It's not exactly an image file anymore. It's actually an Unreal Engine asset called a U asset. But we can use it in a material that we're about, and I just put that in materials, didn't I? So I'm going to take it over here and move it over to textures. Put it in the wrong folder. So it's in our textures folder. Here in our materials folder, hope you followed that. What I did was I accidentally put that in the materials folder. I wanted it in the textures folder because it's just a graphic image. And I moved it to the textures folder by dragging it and dropping it on textures. And here's the materials folder. Inside this folder, I'm going to right click and I'm going to select material. And I'm going to name this test floor _M. And this naming convention, some people like to put the type thing in front of the name. I like to put it at the end of the name. It makes it easier for me to find stuff rather than just seeing a bunch of M's as the first character. But the M means it's a material. It just makes it visually easier to find in lists and pull downs and other stuff where you will find this. So we've created the material. What we want to do now is double click on it, and it'll open it up in this editor right here. And this is our materials editor. And we need the texture in here, however, and we've got the texture right here. There's a variety of ways this can be done. You can just drag it from here and drop it. You can also go in here and create a texture sample by right-clicking and typing in texture sample. And there's the texture sample, and we could get this. Then we could go in here and find it. Here's the material. With this one, it already picked it up because it was there already. So the easiest way is to drag and drop it. You can also create a texture sample and go find it in the pull down. It's easier to drag drop it. You can also drag drop it if you've got this docked up here. You can just grab it, pull it up here, hover over the dock point, and you'll be in here, and you could drop it that way. So there's a second version of it. Okay, so this is the simple version, and to create this material, all we're going to do is very simply take this and drag it from the RGB output to the base color input, and we have a material created. It's as simple as that to create a material out of a texture. We're just hooking that texture into this material output node. This is what this is called, the material output node. It determines what that texture is going to look like as it comes out. There's a great many other things we can do here. We can process this in many, many ways, and the next step, what we're going to do is add a normal map to this. But to do that, we need to create the normal map. So a normal map is just a simple graphic file that contains numerical values that tells which way the surfaces of this texture are pointing away from it. So when we say normal, what we really mean is a thing called a vector or a pointer pointing away from some surface. And the normal of a surface is a vector that is 90 degrees to that surface. If you think of this texture as a whole bunch of little surfaces, all the little nooks and crannies, there are supposed to be normals pointing out of those. But it's just a picture, it's flat. Let's take a look at it. The normal map that we're going to create with Crazy Bump will tell it how to point the light so that this has a tendency to look rough and look three-dimensional to the eye without having any model information under it to do that. I'm going to click Save. And I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to go to my materials. I'm going to take this material, and I'm going to drop it right on the surface of this. And it didn't do anything. What's wrong? Why didn't this? Oh, I know why. We forgot one more thing. There's a variety of ways that you can get well, these are called nodes, by the way. These boxes, they're little nodes that do various stuff, and they're functions, basically. We can go in here and we can type in text, C-O-O-R-D, not text, it's text, C, texture coordinate right there. This texture coordinate we can plug into the UVs right here, which is what we need. This tells it how to map it onto the surface. We'll talk more detail about texture coordinates. It tells the material how to paint this onto the surface that you're painting it onto. So let's go over here. And now it's painting correctly. But you see, this is the tiling I was talking about. You see that pattern repeating all over the place. We're actually going to fix that so that when you're back away from this, this looks much more like the texture it should. And as you come in close, you'll see more and more detail. But you'll also notice that it looks very flat in this scene. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn the skylight down a little bit. Our light source, I'm going to turn the power of that down some, not a whole lot, just so it's not glaring. There we go. So now we can still see some detail up close, and this is a very nice texture. But when we back away from it, we see all those repeating patterns. We're going to get rid of those by some techniques of scaling our image. For now, let's try to do something with the roughness of this and make these look like boards, make these slits and things and so forth, make it look better. So I'm just going to minimize that and minimize this, and I'm going to fire up this program called Crazy Bump. Now, you can get I showed you the site for this. You can get the 30-day free trial for this if you want, or you can buy it. I think the professional edition is about $99, and there's a student edition if you're in college or in school or in high school or something. You can get the $45 edition for it. And what we want to do, so let me go back. Let me cancel out of that. What I did was I clicked down here on Open. It's a very simple user interface. There's not much in the way of controls. There's some tools here that you can do different stuff with. We're not going to get into that here. We're going to use this very simpler. We're just going to open our image. And what we want to do is open a photograph. And it's not that textures folder. It's on E down here in videos. And Unreal Course, textures, and the texture that we want is this floor seamless. And Crazy Pup is thinking, so puny humans stand aside. Now here it's showing you two images. What it's done is it's done some math processing on this, and it says, I think that this is indented and this should be outdented and so forth, but maybe it's like this. It did some math in a different way, and you can choose the one that you think looks best, and I think this one is the more accurate to our board layout, the way things should be. This is a tiny little sample of it it's showing here, and what it's produced here is what we want, which is the normal map. There's other maps. There's a displacement map. It tells it how much it's displaced off the surface. We will at some point in time use that, but we will have to use a different model for that because we need some, for the displacement to work properly, we actually need some underlying geometry for it to be able to move around. And the occlusion map tells how light is applied or not applied to it based on what's called ambient occlusion, which is the best way to explain ambient occlusion is if you look in the corner of a room, you'll notice that there's more light on the walls than there is in the corner of the room, and that's because not as much light can get into the corner of the room in order to light that up because of the angles of the walls. Ambient occlusion is how light is prevented from getting into certain things. Specularity tells it a little bit about where there's shiny spots and not so shiny spots, and the diffuse in this case is just our normal image, our regular image. It's diffuse is the basic color scheme of the thing that you're looking at. And what we can do is we can export all of these out, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to save all of them. When we click on save, we can create a copy of the diffuse to the clipboard, or we can save the diffuse or save all textures, or this repair is experimental. I'm not sure what that does. I don't think I've ever used it. We can look into that at some point in time. What I want to do is save all textures, and it's going to ask me where I want to save it. I want to save it right in with my textures, and I'm just going to leave this name alone because it's going to rename my files, and I'll show you that after the save is done. So let's save it. Okay, so Crazy Bump is finished, and now let me show you the files that it created here. We have our original seamless texture that we made. We now have this seamless color. That's just a copy of this one that it produced for us, properly named color. We have a displacement, we have a normal map, and we have an occlusion map and a specularity map. So these can be used in Unreal Engine. In fact, in order to maintain this naming convention here, I'm going to grab all of these along with their name, and we're going to change the texture that we use. I'm just going to take these. This time I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to select textures and put them in here, and I'm just going to take all of those and drag them over here and import them in. And then we're going to change our material to use the one named color. That way we have a consistent set of textures that are all named properly, so we know which one is which without any confusion. So there's all of our textures. We won't need this one anymore, but before I delete it, I'm going to remove it from the material. So let's open this material again. I'll pull it off to the side here. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to go ahead and delete this node so that it's not there anymore. I'm going to go back to my textures now, and I'm going to delete this texture. It's going to tell me that it's got a reference. That's because I didn't save it. Let's save this. And you notice now the color went away. So now I should be able to safely delete this. And it doesn't show it referencing anything, so we can just say force delete, get rid of the old original texture, and now everything's named color, displacement, normal, occlusion, and specularity. I'm just going to grab all of them. We're not going to use them all right away, but I'm going to throw them in here anyway, and then we'll dock this up to the top so that we can see all of these. So here's our texture sample that is our regular base color, so we just want to go ahead and hook that up. Later we will change that because we're going to do some scaling. This is our displacement. This one here is our specularity. We'll use that one. This one here, we're going to leave the displacement aside. This one here is the ambient occlusion. We want that one. And this one here is our normal map. So I'm going to line these all up right here. I'm going to take my texture coordinates so that all of these textures know how to map to that surface. And we'll see when we do modeling, we're going to build what are called UV maps of the models that we make. And these UV maps will tell this kind of system here exactly how to place our textures on that object that we create. So that's a very important part of mapping this. So what do we want to do now? Well, we want to take our normal map very simply, and we've got this thing over here called normal. If we take this and plug it into the normal map, when we look at this over here, once it renders, it takes a few seconds. Now when we zoom in, you see it appears to have some depth and roughness a little bit. The thing's starting to look like it's got some meat to it, that there's something really there. Down here we have ambient occlusion. Well, right here we have occlusion, ambient occlusion. Let's take this and plug it into the ambient occlusion and see if it looks any better. And now it's got a little bit of shadowing inside the grooves. And finally, what we have here is our specularity, and up here we have specular. If we take this, and I could rearrange these, but I'm going to leave them in this order for now, and plug it into the specular, we should get a little bit of occasional shininess in some places and not so shiny in other places, and make it look a little bit better. So we hit save. And we go back and take a look at our floor. Now things are looking quite a bit different. So we still have the tiling going on, and we'll fix that later, but our floor is looking better. So in the next section, we're going to start putting together a first person character, and we'll walk around on this floor and see what it looks like in when the game plays. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to hit save all. Save all. It's going to come up with this box, save content. You can choose if you, for some reason, don't want to save a particular thing. You can turn it off, but right now, you notice it's save selected, or everything is selected, and we can click save selected, and it will save everything. And it's now asking me where I want to save the map, which is now called untitled. I'm going to change this to there, save test map, because I renamed it. That's right, but I didn't rename it in the so I'm going to save it over that. And real quick, let's double check that and make sure. If we go to settings and we come down here to project settings, maps and modes, that's what we want. And editor startup map, template default, what we want is test map level to be our editor startup map. Then it won't be game default map we want to be also the test level for now. So both of those will start in there. Later, when we create a real start level, we will set the game default map to the appropriate start level of the game. We'll get to that when the time comes. So we can just save, we can just close this, and we'll close our material for now. And that's it for this section. We'll see you in the next part. Alright, well that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. If you liked the video, please hit that like button. If you really liked it, subscribe. And if you want to get notices about when I post new videos, hit that notify button. And we'll see you again. Thanks.